pinpoint the numbers because burnout appears differently to everybody.
Mm.
So some people might be experiencing severe burnout and stress and overwhelm, while somebody in a similar situation, that might not, that might just be a typical Tuesday, and that might be what they need to get themselves out of bed and rolling. So it's difficult to pinpoint those numbers, but from the research and things that I've gathered, it tends to be around that 55 to high 60s, low 70%.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, a show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today I've got Rob Tracy with me. And Rob is an amazing man because, like me, he is trying to live his life to the fullest. And some of us are really good at that, but our bodies don't let us. So sooner or later, we face burnout. And some of us getting really, really good into that cycle. I'm certainly guilty as charged, or I have been in the past. Now, Rob was sick of being in that cycle, and he developed techniques to really change his own life for good and is now teaching others to do the same. So today we're talking burnout, close and personal, and it will be a cool talk. So welcome to my show, Rob.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm glad we got this on the page and we're ready to roll. This is exciting.
Well, exactly. Hey, what's the story nowadays? If we look at burnout figures, we must be talking about 50, 60% of the working population on LinkedIn or wherever these things are being investigated are replying that they've got huge stress levels and are either close to burnout or have experienced burnout in the last year. Is that the figure that you work also with, or do you think these figures are exaggerated?
It's difficult to pinpoint the numbers because burnout appears differently to everybody.
Mm.
So some people might be experiencing severe burnout and stress and overwhelm, while somebody in a similar situation, that might not, that might just be a typical Tuesday, and that might be what they need to get themselves out of bed and rolling. So it's difficult to pinpoint those numbers, but from the research and things that I've gathered, it tends to be around that 55 to high 60s, low 70%.
Indeed. And I think you're quite right the way you have described it, because ultimately many of us have learned to compartmentalize. And sometimes there are severe flow-on effects of what is happening in our lives, and we're actually heading towards burnout, but we don't recognize it. There will be denial, there will be a lack of insight, there will be just people just accept, oh, that's my working life. When looking from the outside, you would think, oh my God. So there might actually be a very higher percent, a much higher percentage in some groups of people out there. Are there certain groups of people that are more likely to experience burnout?
In what I've gathered and seen, everybody is equally likely. It's especially in today's age where it's the hustle grind and everybody wants to
Hmm.
push more and they take on more responsibilities and challenges. And it could be easy. And sometimes there are people who even have the ability or at least recognize that burnout is beginning to develop, but they continue to push along,
Hmm.
although because they know they just want to get to that next metric or they're striving for a particular goal.
Hmm.
And in some cases, you might necessarily need to dive into a little bit of burnout, but the a lot of people fail to put the boundaries up and set those deadlines for I will push for this period of
Hmm.
time, but once I've crossed that finish line, it's time for me to shift into a different season to allow myself to regen a little bit.
Now, and that's so important. We'll talk about that shortly, about our effective ways, how we can actually mitigate that risk. But let's talk first about burnout because it's a bit of a cliche nowadays. Everyone is burned out. And you could argue that, well, are we overdiagnosing it or are we overcalling it for lay people? What are criteria that you would use to define that someone is heading close to or is actually in the middle of a burnout?
I think you hit it on the head there. It is sort of like a blanket statement there. It
Mm.
does appear in a lot of different shades and different colors and such for different people. And
Mm.
for me specifically, I know that I'm a my main drivers for that get me moving and pushing for my business and such is adversity, it's unity, and it's achievement.
Mm.
And so adversity being my number one driver, I need some form of challenge and change and something for me to work towards, to overcome. And when I was experiencing extreme burnout, I was so stuck in the mundane, day after day, same clients, same problems, same issues. And it became very dull. And that was the slippery slope for me to getting into that burnout. So for me, for example, I needed more challenge in my life. And that's one way that I see a lot of individuals that don't necessarily always talk about, because when we think burnout, we think overstressed and overworked and to the max, and it appears in other ways too. So, for example, me there, I was just saying.
Intriguing. Because you're quite right. If we were to look at studies who are looking more closely at burnout, you will typically find certain characteristics that are relating to the job, to the person, to the environment. So there's always sort of multifactorial. But one of the things is that you're working very hard with not necessarily a clear mission, a clear purpose in your life, and that you feel that many things are out of your control. And one sort of situation, one scenario that often is described. Having said that, for you, you were in control. You could take on however many clients you wanted, but something was missing. So there was, I guess, the missing element was there, the mission or
Mhm.
lack thereof, the purpose, lack thereof. So it's interesting. So that what you define is a different definition, but I like it because you come to this point where you are no longer displaying your typical traits towards your clients, isn't it? How do you towards your clients?
How did I change with my clients
No,
or?
towards your clients when you were heading towards the burnout. How did you realize that, oh, now it's getting to a level that I can no longer accept?
It wasn't just a flip of the switch type of a moment. I was in what I call robot mode, where I was just constantly grinding and
Yeah,
pushing and
yeah.
taking on more clients. And there's nothing wrong with that robot mode. As I hinted at earlier, robot mode is great. You're efficient, you get a lot done. But the bad side is if you stay there too long, you lose out on a little bit of human mode. And without that human mode, you lack that awareness and the
Mm,
emotional connection and things. And that's where I started to see things starting to fall apart is
mm,
I wasn't
mm.
being challenged. My energy was drained, no motivation. I started getting kind of confused. Oh, do I want to continue with what I'm doing? Is this enough? Am I even making good enough impact? I was very disorganized with my life and outside of my schedule of clients. It was nothing else going on. And
Right.
socially, I was isolated and I just felt like there was no opportunity for me. So when I had all that
Yeah.
stuff going on, I continued to push, 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 and everything around me started to continue falling apart. And it wasn't until my dad had passed away suddenly from stage 4 pancreatic cancer that a switch did flip in my head, but it wasn't enough for me to change what I was doing because that full same schedule, same routine thing ended up becoming a distraction. And then it was about a year or so later that I was denied that distraction. So as I'm using work to distract myself, everything else continues to fall apart. And now I was denied that distraction. Clients were away. I had a weekend, a free weekend. I'm making plenty of money, but nobody to spend it with, nothing to do. So I was forced to spend some time to reflect on what had been happening, where am I at with my life. And it used to be this thing that was so much fun and bright and exciting, and now it's just so dull and gray and lonely. And in that weekend, I had spent time like, hey, what do I need to do to get back to where I was? What do I need to do to find how to get out of this situation?
Mm.
And that's really where the things started bringing back to me like, okay, I need to start to challenge myself a little bit more. I need to start taking care of and paying attention to what I'm consuming. I need to
Mm.
start to optimize my routines and my rules and connect with more people and surround
Mm.
myself with better influences and so on. And then that became the new journey of, all right, let's get out of this hole and start creating a better life for ourselves.
Which is fantastic. Now you're calling it burnout. It's the crossroads. There are many words for that situation. I had asked you earlier with regards to the way that you treated your clients. For us doctors, we're nurses or anyone on the front line, on the cold front, it is often lack of empathy. When someone says, "Oh, I've got pain here and I'm suffering there, and my wife has run away," And instead of you listening with your heart open, you say, "You think you've got a bed? Ha, let me tell you about my life." That's sort of the lack of empathy that often in healthcare settings is one of the key warning symbols. And the bells ringing, stop, you need to put a break in. And so I think there are unique markers for many different occupations and places. It is beautiful that you had that. And I loved what you said because we so often, first of all, define ourselves by who we are. So I defined myself for a very long time as a doctor, as a pain physician, as an anesthetist. That was who I was. That was my quintessence. And then when that was no longer there for me, then suddenly everything fell apart. So this external validation that you described and was there, you grew from it, it fed you. But then there was this weekend when suddenly someone pulled the shades away from you and you actually had to face the reality. Was that scary?
Yeah, I think so, because there's so much uncertainty, and most people shy away from the uncertainty because they feel safer when they know what's going on and
Mm,
such. But internally, I knew something needed to change,
mm,
and I was looking for that change. So I was a little hesitant, but as I continued to get around better influences and people, I could see that they were growing and doing different things
mm,
that started to ignite the light again in my head.
mm,
That got me getting a little more creative and thinking, oh, what can I do? How can I do this? And as I started changing my coaching, it was a clunky process. It took a while to really identify what it is that I wanted to be doing and how I wanted to be
mm,
show up and help other people. And like I said, it was a process. It took time, but it
mm,
definitely feels really good now. It's like I
mm,
get energized from helping others and identifying different situations and
mm.
sharing my stories and experiences and things. And it's well worth the discomfort.
I was about to say, are you really getting satisfied by your clients or are you getting satisfied by the change in yourself? Was your own transformation not something that puts quietly a smile on your face? And when you see yourself 5 years ago and you see yourself now, how do you look at yourself now? Are you version 2.0, version 4.0? What version are you?
That's a good question. I think still the same old person. I think it's just back to my original self, I guess I would say,
Mm,
to because when I was in strength and conditioning and I was working so many hours and it was just tirelessly just
mm,
going at it day after day, 7 days a week for weeks on end, I think I started to drift away from Rob. I think that's when I started getting into Rob 2.0. And I think it took all of that for me to go back to the
yeah.
playful, joyful, the energized, the excited kind of Rob who I think when I think of myself. So I don't know if that answers your question correctly, but I feel like I'm back to the old me.
Which is absolutely beautiful. I certainly don't want to go back to the old me. The old me, I've come to love my old me, warts and all. I can show him the respect, but he was a dick. There was the emotional awareness of a rock and so many other things, some mental health challenges, PTSD, etc. So do I want to go back there? No. Do I have, how shall I say that, reinvented my life? Yes. And I think we both have probably done very much the same work with actually similar outcomes. Because what were the steps that you took, the practical steps that got you out of the rut? How did you find your joy again? In its own right, that is a tall order to find joy in your life. That equals finding a mission, finding a purpose, finding those kind of things. Wow, a lot of people will struggle to do that, and some will never find it. How did you go about that?
Well, I think I started off by just identifying, well, obviously there was a problem. There was something needed to change. And once I realized that, I dove in and started trying different things, little tiny challenges here and there, playful things that could be fun to just push myself a little bit. And those little challenges created some small wins for myself, whether that be getting back into the gym, being a little more serious with my own training or
Mm,
signing up for public speaking class or just any little thing that kind of
Yeah.
like tested me, learning to cook a little bit, getting some here. And those little small wins started to build the momentum.
Yes.
And then I
Yes.
dove into changing a little bit more of what I was consuming. So not just the food and the dietary nutrition, but then paying attention to the digital nutrition too. So the podcasts, the books, the TV shows, the types of music I'm listening to. I
So,
started to just change that a little bit. And that really helped me maximize my energy and motivation. So I'm excited and going. And I'm not saying that I just like, turned off Netflix permanently, but I was like learning to flow with the different things with my life, so for the different seasons. So when it was time to work, I could set myself up to motivate and create some stuff. And when it was time to deload and chill out, it was time to deload and chill out. And that really started to build the confidence to take on bigger and newer challenges. And I was constantly filling up my bucket again with that energy.
beautiful.
And then it was time to realign myself, figuring out, all right, what are my real values? Because I always hear, coming from the strength and conditioning background, different teams have different values, different businesses have different values. And then I was looking to myself, what does that even mean? What are my values? And having
Oh,
to dig in and really self-identify with what I believe to be true for myself and understanding myself on a deeper level. And that allowed me to navigate the decisions towards figuring out what my mission was and what my purpose was. And then from there, it was just about optimizing my rules and routines, making sure that my habits reflect where I'm trying to get to, and then getting around better people, as I was saying earlier, making sure that I had a mentor. I had some captains. I like to use a lot of sports references. So, like a coach, captains to lean on, and then a good, strong crowd to help cheer me on. And from there, it was how to give back more than just myself and really start to create some different opportunities. And a lot of people consider me to be super lucky, and I consider myself to be one of the most luckiest people in the world. And that really comes from just putting myself out and seizing opportunities when they pop up and doing whatever I can, whenever I can within my boundaries.
luck, yeah, about that. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So, lucky typically means that you have worked really, really hard on yourself and on those things that others are shying away from. And to a certain degree, you're a difficult one here because, on the one hand, in your coaching, you would have dived in and helped others. And by helping others, you help yourself. You actually see things, you see patterns emerging in others that you can then change in yourself if you recognize them. So you were actually exposed to a lot of emotional intelligence at a relatively early age. That's fantastic. You didn't need a trauma to finally push you into learning more about your feeling. Yet, I recognized in between your words quite some patterns emerging there, that you threw yourself into your work as an escape mechanism, for example, to run away. Were there other ways that you ran away? In the sense of alcohol, drugs, sport, sex, Netflix. Yeah, there are so many
Yeah.
ways how we escape our reality.
And pretty much any and all of those things, different, a lot of different relationships, jumping from one to another, and playing sports and making and taking on new teams, new roles, and just pushing myself out there in different leagues and things, and then late partying and stuff like that. So it was a tough 20s for myself, with a lot of spreading myself thin in different areas, and a lot of early mornings and late nights.
And again, this is the tuition fee that I guess you pay for life. We need to make wrong decisions in order to be wiser. And they're not necessarily wrong. They are just maybe not the best in the long run. But then again, they give you some good stories to tell around the campfire. But then suddenly you felt this need to find something more sincere. Is it fair to say that you lacked a purpose? You lacked a mission? Is
Oh,
that
definitely.
is and is it fair to say that really you talk a lot about joy, but you also talk about community, talk about teams, team sports in your examples. What is the role of community in your life? Is that
Yeah.
something that people need to focus on? Or is the lonesome ranger not just fully sufficient?
Yeah, I don't. I know a lot of people try to be like the lone wolf or
Mm,
lone ranger kind of role, but and I guess it can be done. People have done it, but it's a heck of a lot easier and for me, more enjoyable achieving success and doing things with others. And
mm,
I think my need for team or for community really came from my childhood. My parents got divorced when I was super young,
mm,
moved across state lines, and it was difficult keeping the family together, and moving different school districts made it very difficult to not only make friends but to maintain friends.
mm,
Because if I don't see them in school, if I'm in a different school, I'm not going to see them anymore. And so when I finally found myself in a town of Highland, where we eventually called home, my mom and my sister and I, that gave me an opportunity to branch out a little bit more. And
mm,
I got into sports and athletics through friends. And that ended up becoming like the new family because working together,
mm,
learning a lot of values and working
mm,
towards a common goal. And so sports became that staple for me. And as I continued to grow and get better, stronger, bigger, faster, stronger, and starting to
mm,
play a little bit more, the more I played, the more friends I started to get. And then the more friends I got, the more birthday parties I'd get invited to and such. And if I wanted to
yeah.
go to those birthday parties, I had to make sure my grades were good. And so then that was a direct link. And through college, it was sports
Mm,
and such.
mm,
And then after college, it was where am I going to find my team or my family, my community? And that made it so easy for me to get into strength and conditioning and working with different teams and different cultures, seeing all these different individuals working together. And that gave me that sense. And that's exactly where I guess the community came from and why I hold it so dear to myself, because
mm.
I need to be a part of it. I want to be able to work together with others to achieve that common goal.
Which is so beautiful, isn't it? The opposite to addiction or the opposite to depression is connectivity, is community, is being together with others. And not just for the sake of it, but actually finding meaningful tribes that you subscribe to, that you are becoming part of. And I think that is so beautiful. So many men are lacking that. And maybe it is the XY chromosome setup that puts us a bit at odds, that we have to prove ourselves all the time as the man, etc. I loved what you said earlier, that you surrounded yourself with mentors, that you surrounded yourself with others that were maybe a bit further down the path than you. And I think that's the key thing, that you want to have a power team where you are the dumbest member of the team. Because if you're the top dog, you're not learning, you're not growing. Yes, you may be practicing leadership, but that's about it. Now, I love it what you focus upon, to actually put yourself out there, the learning to cook, the learning to, I can't remember the other examples you said, but actually learning a new skill, a new task is incredibly powerful and forces you to demonstrate integrity. Because in order to learn something, you need to do it again and again and again. And it's beautiful. So you've actually implemented a hell of a lot of things. And there will be so many people out there who are listening and think, oh my God, where to start? What are the low-hanging fruit that you would tell someone who is completely overwhelmed in their life and who says, oh, fuck it, I don't know where to start. I just want to curl up in a ball. Where should they start?
I think it's with trying small things or just like the little bit of challenges and such. It doesn't need to be jumping into public speaking if you're
Mm,
terrified of connecting with other
mm,
individuals, but
mm,
if you're somebody with a couple friends, just getting together and just going out or trying to connect with new people, doing something social
mm,
or connecting with others on online space or somewhere. You want to, I think pushing your comfort zone. I think that's the best place to start.
mm,
Finding ways where you feel safe enough to push the comfort zone, because
mm.
anytime you're going to be expanding that comfort zone, it's going to be scary and it's going to feel like it's unsafe, but
Yeah,
having a way in the safe
yeah.
environment that you can try new things and experience new.
How beautiful is that, isn't it? That's definitely the way to go. And it's scary, and your brain will automatically tell you about 20 reasons why you shouldn't do it, or things that are more important. If you feel that your brain is warning you like that, you should take that as a messenger that you probably actually should do it, whatever that is. And There's so many things. And there is no boundary, really. There's so much. You said a public speaking course. How about stand-up comedy? How about ballroom dancing? How about, I don't know, playing bridge? Weird things that at the moment sound weird to you, but you never know unless you try what really floats your boat. You might be surprised that you are actually a natural in a certain sport that you would have never ever looked at prior to that. So I find being curious and inquisitive at the best starting point, and to say, oh, why not? Let's give it a go and try it once or twice or three times. I find that has been actually such a beautiful starting point for many of my journeys. And nowadays I try to do every 3 months, I try to learn a new skill or try to learn something new that I have not done before. And that's actually quite cool. So we talked about community. And I know that you're coming from a strength from a coaching background. What is the role of activity exercise in this journey to breaking out of burnout, breaking out of the rut?
I think it goes right back to what we were just talking about, how it introduces us to discomfort in
Mm,
a safe environment,
mm,
like going to the gym, you pushing yourself a little bit, heavier weights, running a little bit faster. It's a gateway to everything else. It's you getting in, you're strengthening, you're pushing your body's
mm,
limits, you're connecting with other individuals who are also pushing themselves to get a little bit better.
mm,
You start to go to the gym, you have to schedule your sessions. You got to make sure you have time to get to the gym or start
mm,
to exercise and move. And then that's going to help you build your schedule and your routines around it. And once you start going to the gym a little more consistently, you start to
mm.
develop better habits with eating and the rest of your day. And I think the movement, the physical activity is the gateway. I think that's where it really all starts.
In functional medicine, we have increasingly recognized the importance of movement. And indeed, the WHO and many other big organizations out there actually are very clear about it, that sedentary lifestyle, us sitting around not doing anything, is the new smoking. You living a sedentary lifestyle where you don't do much is the equivalent of doing a pack a day of smoking as far as the risk of cancer, heart disease, etc. is concerned. So I couldn't agree more. And in all fairness, I have put my money where my mouth is and do every day half an hour or three-quarters of an hour of sport. Even if I don't have the time in one chunk, I'll do activity snacks throughout the day so that I actually can accumulate the time, and I feel 10,000 times better. My body is leaner, stronger, and maybe fitter as I have been even in my 20s and 30s. So the past does not equal the future, I guess, is the key. And what you're describing is just the starting point. We've touched upon the joy of finding community as a mission. We talked about activity, that you're getting your body ready to accept new challenges, to then conquer those challenges and step outside of our comfort zone. Many of us are still jeopardizing and sabotaging ourselves with food, nutrition. You only touched upon it. As far as I'm concerned, that is such a core component. I can create your burnout. I can make you depressed. Give me 2 weeks. I can make you depressed. I just need to change your diet in the right way, and you feel like shit. And on the flip side, we can do so much more. Did you experience that yourself? Is there a certain path in nutrition that you follow?
Not a particular one, just I guess because of my background and everything that I've learned, I've been able to weave my path with nutrition wise pretty well. But
Hmm,
I guess if I were to take it back prior to schooling and going back to school, grade school and paying
hmm,
attention to sports and trying to prioritize that, that's really when I began to pay attention to my dietary nutrition and
hmm,
focusing on getting better quality proteins
hmm, hmm.
and fruits and vegetables. And when I was super young, I was a really picky kid and didn't really like a lot of things. But I think through the
Yeah,
teens and stuff, I just started eating anything and everything because as long as it was vegetables, fruit, and I think that kind of set a good foundation for myself going
beautiful,
forward, just
beautiful.
being open and available to the different fruits and vegetables and such.
Oh, brilliant. Again, this is someone did a really good job Oh, I don't know how you got to that point. So many people are still going for the ultra processed foods, and you pay the price for it. You're running on 70, 80%, as far as I'm concerned, or less of your possibilities by just eating shit. And it is so amazing once we actually give our body what it needs. Suddenly there's a new lease to life, and there is a new start happening once we do get the micronutrients right, once we get the protein right and the fiber right. These are sort of the big ones that I look out for. And I make sure that they're all in my life. And God, it truly changed my life compared with, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, when, of course, you would eat at work, you would eat at whatever is lying around on a bench. Oh, yeah, that's a muffin. Ooh, nice. And then half an hour later, so this is nowadays missing. And there's a far more sustained fueling of my systems. And I love that. The hydration, we haven't touched upon that. So there are many little steps, isn't it, that we all can take and create a solid foundation with which is far, far less likely to head towards the burnout. And ultimately, it's a path. You're meandering, and sometimes you're a bit closer to the burnout, and sometimes you can move away from it. But ultimately, you're going along this cliff. And I think there's so much that we can do for those people who are in the middle of a burnout out there and feeling completely powerless and say, oh, I can't do anything. No, you can do so much. We have touched upon all those possibilities, Rob. So this was a really, really good thing. And I love the way that we have moved away in our discussion from the I'm so depressed and burned out that I'm lying literally on the couch and can't do anything else than watch telly. I mean, that's the end stage, so to speak. But there's so many other people who are just much, much earlier in the race, but they're teetering. They're sort of looking over the side of the cliff and think there's about 1 foot away from the cliff. And for those people, there's so much you can do. So don't bloody give up. And I guess, Rob, that's where your coaching comes in. Rob, tell us more. If people say, wow, I want to know more about Rob, he seems to be a good dude, and maybe he can guide me away from the cliff and towards a life where I don't feel in the same old rut. How can they find you?
The best place to find me or to stay up to date or check out some of the content that I've been creating is on social media. Typically hang out the most on Instagram and LinkedIn nowadays, both great platforms. And you can find me just by searching my name, Rob Tracz, on both of them. Should be
Mm.
the first name to pop up.
Excellent. Fantastic. Guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast because you've got all of Rob's details down there. Rob, you're an amazing man. I'm so pleased that you have found this mission and this purpose that gave you the power to become that better version of yourself, that stronger version of yourself, that has a meaning, that gets up in the morning and say, let's do that. And for many of us, that is missing or has been missing at one stage in our lives. And therefore, it's so important that we touch upon it. If you're just in that rut, the rut means that you're not yet far enough outside of your comfort zone. And therefore, you might not take the action. But hopefully, your interview today has actually made people realize, hang on, I'm in that rut. Is it maybe time for me to take action here? So, Rob, you're an amazing man. Thank you so much for our interview and your insights. You certainly challenged some of my thoughts, some of my beliefs, and had not looked at it this way. So I'm very, very grateful to you for being a guest on my show.
Oh, I appreciate the kind words and I really appreciate you bringing me on to share some of my experiences and
Yeah.
insights with your audience and the rest of the world. So thank you
Hey.
for taking the time and talking with me today.
Thank you, brother. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with
I never
intention.
give up.
Bye.
I never give up. I never give up.